Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I am Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, no cliches, no buzzwords, only stuff that works. I was really looking forward to this conversation today with someone who is in charge of helping to prepare new teachers for the rigors of the classroom. My guest today is Cameron Castenada, and she's been in education for over 20 years as a classroom ELA teacher in middle school, teaching 7th and 8th grade honors. And she was the ALA department chair. She was an ELA and ELD coach. And now she's the induction coordinator for her district. She was a 2004 University of California Irvine Writing Project Fellow. The highlight of her career was when she was one of 11 teachers honored for the California League of Middle School Educator of the Year in 2015 and Employee of the Year in her school district, which is Placentia Yorba Linda Unified School District. She currently runs the induction program for her district and oversees 6 to 12 curriculum and instruction. She is passionate about supporting new teachers and methods to engage students. I think you're going to like this one. Hi, Cam. It's great to have you here today. I'm looking forward to a conversation about all the work you do.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Well, as I said in the introduction, you are working as an induction program manager and helping, and this is for new teachers. Can you just describe, because we have listeners all over the country, all over the world, kind of describe what it takes to become licensed, to get a credential in California and where your program fits in?
Sure, no problem. So after a candidate would finish their undergraduate program in their university, meaning they did their undergrad and then 1 to 2 years of credentialing where they would undergo their student teaching, they can then be hired in a school. And that's where I come in, and they enroll in a 2-year program called Induction, and it's through the state of California. So it's a requirement, not just a district thing. And so in those 2 years, they are given just-in-time support and assigned a mentor to help them throughout the process. And it's just a way to ease them into the career. After the 2 years, then we recommend them for their clear credential, and they're all done.
Okay, just to clarify. So I'm a teacher, or I want to be a teacher. I go through an approved program at the university to get a bachelor's degree. Then I need to get into a school of education for 1 to 2 years, however long that. I know that some universities have accelerated programs, but now you need to get into another program. But that's only the beginning. That's not a full credential yet. It's enough to teach, but they're going to have to go through another 2-year program.
Correct. So that is, then they'd have what we call a preliminary credential. And then after induction, it's considered a clear credential.
So this isn't an optional program for teachers. So when you hire a new teacher with a credential, they have to go through the program.
Correct.
So what's different? I mean, what is different about the professional credential that you will provide the program for than what they learned in the first 2 years?
Well, we know there's a difference between theory and practice. And so a lot of what happens in the university is a lot of theory and book work and study and observations. Whereas when you're in the career every day, that's where the real coaching support comes in. And we know how difficult teaching can be, especially in the first 2 years. And this actually came as part of a study, they found, teachers were quitting within the first 5 years of teaching. And so this was put into place as almost like a gradual release. But what's different is they really get a sidekick, otherwise known as a mentor, where they're their partner, they're their Yoda, carrying them through for 2 years and really act as a thought partner because this person at this point should be able to stand alone, but with support. So that's really what induction does versus maybe a university program when they're first starting out in the credential program.
So can you talk about some of the things that you do in the induction program? When I say some of the things you do, not necessarily what you do to support, but what would be the curriculum over these 2 years? Because, okay, let's back up even
Yeah.
further because I know that you require, as the manager, you require so many meetings,
Yes.
in-person meetings.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my question. During those in-person meetings, what's the curriculum? What have they done in the meantime
Yeah.
between the meetings?
So some of it is going through an inquiry cycle where they investigate a problem of practice, and this is by their choice. So again, it's driven by the individual. And their mentor kind of helps them craft an inquiry question that they're going to investigate. And then through action research, they're going to solve the problem, then therefore giving them some tools in their toolbox, some strategies, and also they're going to be measuring student growth to see if this actually worked and what was their growth as a teacher. So, kind of measuring that. So, that's part of it. The other part of the program is we require training, and the training is by choice, if that makes sense. So, they have to be receiving ongoing PD, professional development, but they get the choice of what they want to pursue and investigate. And we hope that it ties into their goal, but it doesn't always. Sometimes they want to know about behavior, but they're really working on writing. It's just a way to kind of build their repertoire. And so we do have 4 meetings throughout the year. Every program kind of approaches it differently. We have decided to move to more in person because we want new teachers and their mentors to be able to network and form a community of learners. And then each, we'll call it mini conference that I offer 4 times a year. There's various sessions that they get to choose from and register for, and it's all driven by what they want to learn about, what their goals are, and then also what we can offer. So it's anything from, behavior, empathetic approaches to teaching, to differentiation 101, to I did a training on vertical learning. So, what is vertical learning and how do you do it? So those are just a variety of things we've offered this year.
Okay, I don't think I could write fast enough, put down all the questions that I have about this. So let's talk about the inquiry. You said that they get to choose that. So can you give some examples of some things, some inquiry questions, inquiry studies? I can't remember the term you used. Uh,
Yeah, it's a problem of practice or some kind of, it's something that's keeping them up at night, something that they want to improve in their classroom, maybe something they want to improve as a teacher. And it's an area that they want to grow in because, oftentimes the easy one is the one we know. And so, we don't always want to pick the easy question. And just like any good, we'll say thesis statement, that's my writing background there. You want it to be loose enough to where they have options to investigate, but tight enough to where it's not so broad. It's like, the ocean. It's something kind of narrow and loose at the same time. So it could be, what are best practices to support student learning? Or what are the best strategies to teach a paragraph? So it could be any of those, but it's all driven by what they want to improve in.
okay, so then how do they proceed through that? We know they have a mentor. We know that they have you. I know that you talked about a community. So how do they proceed through that? What would be a time frame for them to go through the cycle of inquiry and action research?
Oh, it's months. So we start in late September and they wrap up their first inquiry by December. But all the while, I guess the inquiry cycle guides them through a series of questions and reflections and investigations to help them arrive there. So we have them identify, what standards would this generally meet? What, if any, English learner supports would you want to embed and look at? Also, what kind of universal design for learning strategies would you maybe want to incorporate or again look into? And those are just some of the ways we kind of funnel them into an answer. But I also have them, they can attend PD, like we said, either provided by us or another place. And we know that, teacher Instagram is also a great learning tool, even teacher TikTok, YouTube. So they can go really anywhere to get information or watch videos and strategies to help them put this into practice.
Okay. Oh, every time you have an answer, I got more questions. So, but let's move on for a second. Let's move on for a second because something else that you said, I kind of want to clarify for listeners, and that is, so you have your program, and you said that every school district, I mean, this is going to be required of every teacher, every new teacher to get their professional credential, but you're in a big district. You're in a fairly big, well, no, I'm gonna say it's a big district. What happens? How do they get into programs when they're working in a small district? Who else
Yeah.
provides the programs? I guess is what I'm saying, asking.
Yeah. Yeah. I know universities offer induction, most of them. Cal State Fullerton, for one. OCDE, so our Orange County Department of Education, will also offer that. And really, any Department of Ed probably has induction, but I know that one for a fact. Concordia University also offers a teacher induction. And then, like private schools, they can go through an LEA like us. They could apply through our program if they wanted to. So we partner with surrounding districts that don't have it, or charters, or private schools.
Oh, so you will have teachers from other places. Oh, okay. Okay. How about vice versa? If they're hired in your district, can they do induction someplace else?
Yes, they can obviously go to Cal State Fullerton, and a lot of them, they wrap their master's program with it. So, it's a two for one. But yeah, they're welcome to go. They don't have to use ours. However, a lot of districts currently are offering it for free with a special grant that we have right now. That'll be sunsetting next year. So it's really advantageous of them to want to go through a district that offers free induction. Otherwise, they'll have to pay for the program if they go to Cal State or OCDE.
So if a teacher comes in doing the induction at another program, they still get a district mentor. Is that correct?
Correct. They are assigned a mentor.
Okay. Okay. So we have all of these programs and they have to be authorized. You have to be authorized to do this, I'm guessing. In fact, I think I was down there once when you were having a review
Yes.
to be authorized to do this. So do you have to submit your curriculum someplace or how does that work? Because if you
Yeah.
have all of these places doing this and they all come out with a California teaching license, how does that work?
Yeah. So it is monitored by the state. I think I attribute it like WASC for induction. And so a site visit team does review all of your work and also samples of candidate work, and they go through an accreditation process. And so my first year as the induction coordinator, I was also in an admin credential program and going through accreditation. So all my worlds collided. And it really did, as a program director, kind of, I was really able to understand the back end of the program because I was always a mentor. I had mentored in this program, I would say, except for my first year of teaching and the 2 years I had my kids, every year I was an induction mentor, and it was just one of those my favorite things to do as a teacher. And so I knew that side of it and the supporting part and the mentoring, but I didn't know the paperwork part and also the accountability part of that. And so there's program and common standards that we have to adhere to. And so, what those auditors do is they look at all of that evidence to see, are we aligned with the program? And so, it can be loose and tight at the same time because we can make changes to the program as needed, so long as we adhere to their program and common standards.
So this is time for the 60 minutes part of the interview, the tough questions, the tough questions.
Ooh,
Okay. So
okay.
so far you described the cycle of inquiry, the inquiry that they do. And this is after they've already spent 2 years. Okay. And now they're doing this. One of the critiques that I've always had about teacher prep programs is that to be successful in a teacher prep program, it was more being successful in student behaviors versus teacher behaviors. And so far, the things that we have talked about, it hasn't been like, okay, we're going to go observe you in a classroom, do these things. Am I missing that part, or is that part of the induction? Because I'm just going to make a joke here. I know you may have heard that there have been some criticisms of teacher prep programs.
Yeah. You know, some of the criticisms we hear is that it's additional work, it's not meaningful, it's redundant. I already did this. Why do we have to do this again? And so it really is our task to make this useful and applicable. And I have pulled any questions that seem repetitive, and I do survey them quite often to ask them, like, which areas do you feel like we don't need? And I have reduced the amount in a way of work because it was kind of repetitive. I think the number one thing that the feedback that I get about the program is their mentor, hands down. No one's going to want to say, I like the paperwork the best. It's that mentor who's there just for them, meeting one on one once a week. It's that undivided time to spend on their goals and what they need. And also, I train our mentors so that we have this rule. I call it an 80-20 rule. 80% the candidate is talking, and you can paraphrase or coach them through coaching questions, but we try not to give advice, and we try to lead them in down a path that's successful. But I don't want to ever hear that's like the kiss of death, that this program, it was pointless and just another hoop to jump. And we get those every now and then, but my job, I feel like, is to create a meaningful experience and also setting in a practice that they're going to use forever. That plan, teach, apply, rinse, and repeat. That's what I want to see from them.
Well, you have served, and in your introduction, we said that you have served as a mentor and you've served as a coach. So when you are working with mentors, I want to talk about this for a second because it's one of those things, sometimes we don't know the difference. When you're working with mentors, what are their duties for these new teachers versus what you did as a coach?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Now I see what you mean by tough questions. I think mentoring, we definitely use that cognitive coaching approach. And so it's leading while guiding and taking that inquiry mindset and that question stance. So we train them on, how to ask questions, when to ask questions, We also train them on, ways to build rapport and that type of thing. And I think you had mentioned earlier, we do go in and observe. So they do get feedback, and I train the mentors on how to give them feedback. So that's that. When I was a coach, I lived mostly in the curriculum world where I was creating things for teachers. And in secondary, they typically don't want you in their classroom, looking over their shoulder. But I would model lessons every now and then. But a lot of my time was spent researching and creating things for teachers just to make their lives easier. And I created like a newsletter for them to get resources and materials. So that's, I think, the main difference from what I see in the different areas.
Okay, so they could go into your inductees could go into their mentor to observe a lesson. So there are things, many times I think of a mentor for a new teacher of like, negotiating like, where's the photocopier? What are the rules? How do I get along here? Kind of a nuts and bolts type thing. And then the coaching, which is a little bit more time consuming, where you need to be out of the classroom more. I kind of make a distinction that way, but I don't think you're really making that distinction. You're asking those mentors to kind of ask them to do what's necessary based on their inductee.
Yeah, I think it is an intuitive process in some ways because you never know what they're going to bring you and you never know what they're going to need in that moment. And I think that is the greatest challenge in being a mentor in our program. And that's a lot of the questions I get from them. And it's like, what if I don't know the answer?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not the point, right? The point is to discuss and reflect and ask those probing questions to get to something, deeper. So I would, and to also draw out. We want to expect that every candidate probably has that in them. We just got to, pull it out of them and know how to do that. But I guess, the mentor could also put their coach's hat on and help them curriculum wise. I mean, they are matched hopefully by credential type. And so they are an expert in that. And then if you're lucky enough to get one at your site, they can tell you, be careful of this person and, be nice to the secretary. And, this is the copy code, but if you need another one, here's the secret copy code. And so they can help you with the ropes if they're familiar with that too.
Well, it's funny. Here's where we come to the part of the show, the irony part of the show. And, you talked about mentor, you talked about a cognitive coaching model and talked about a non-directive model. And then several years ago, you called me up and said, would you please come down? Because there's a part of their induction program that they're missing. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, but first I want to say how we met.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
so I had the pleasure of working under one of my most favorite principals, James Harden, and I hope he listens, or if he doesn't, we'll send it to him. And he invited Dr. Gene Tabernetti to our site, and I was put on cycle to work with him. And at first, I was a little annoyed. I won't lie, because I had been teaching a long time, at least eight plus years, maybe even 10. And, I'm like, I don't need any more help. I'm good. But I did it because I really respected our principal and give it a try. And so and we must have worked together, 3 days in a row. That's the typical cycle of building the lesson and having that one-on-one time with you. And then you came in and you observed my class, and then we got to debrief. And I share this because there's not a lot of things that can move teachers, what I found, unfortunately. It's tough. It's tough to change as an adult. We know adult learning theory is an art and a craft, and to change behavior or change the way you do things, it takes a lot. And I learned so much about my teaching, and it really did improve the way I planned out my lessons. And so coming to your question now, we were just coming out of COVID. I just had started this new position in induction. And what we were finding was that many of our new teachers had not only done their student teaching through Zoom, some of them even started teaching on Zoom. And so we realized like we probably need to circle the wagons back around and offer more intensive coaching. And this was a very strategic type of coaching. And so we brought you here and you were able to work with, volunteers, but mostly first, second, and we even opened it up and we had a lot of third year teachers who were out of the program that just wanted more. And working alongside you, I got to see your process and it informed me so much of where we need to work on in our lesson planning and also just the method of giving feedback. That was really helpful on that side of it. So I got to experience it, through a teacher perspective and then as a consultant. And so that was really valuable.
Well, and the reason that I brought it up and talked about it as an irony is that, as you know, give some pretty specific recommendations, on how to get better. And finesse it. I mean, it's not just, hey, this is, pointing finger, this is what you need to do. But the idea that it is more specific because it's something that they just don't know. Like you described, you'd been teaching, you're a successful teacher. You were one of the best teachers. That's what James told me before. You might have even been department chair at the time.
I was.
And which probably is another strategic reason that James picked you to do it. But it wasn't that you were doing anything wrong. It's just like, here are some things that we could do better and make your job easier and more effective. So I was kind of like an ancillary uh, piece to this induction program. And
I I think to go on that point, I think teaching is learning. And that was one of the messages I really tried to push through to our new teachers this year is that you always want to be growing. And I will say that is in my personality in general. I think that's partly why I became a teacher because I just like learning. But I think we have to come with that to grow and get better. And I also mentioned to them that the other factors, we never know who's going to be in our classroom. We never know what skills they're going to come in with. And so we have to adjust based on that. And if you don't really know how to adjust, or maybe someone else has another idea of how you can adjust it, that's the key. And so maybe my mindset at that time was, I had a little bit of an ego, or a big ego, but I think we need to get used to that. We need to get used to getting feedback, ripping the Band-Aid off and taking from it, what parts can we take from this to improve?
well said. Well said. One other topic before we say goodbye, and that is, I know we go through cycles in California and across the nation. We have too many teachers and then we don't have enough teachers. And every time we're in this situation now where we really need teachers, what happens is seem to be more alternative programs showing up. I know at one time in California, you could get a credential just with a bachelor's. And then they realized, well, that's not a good idea. So then they started adding things and adding things back until now we are where we are, where you get your preliminary and now you got to go through an additional 2 years of process. But we have lots of, like, what do we have? Internships and
Mhm.
pre-internships. And I mean, there's all sorts of things that we have. So my question to you, as somebody who works with the folks after they've been hired, can you see any difference in the skills and knowledge that they come with based on coming from a traditional program for a university versus more
Oh.
alternative programs?
I mean, without throwing anybody under the bus, I think, they're not all created equal, right? All the programs out there. I think based on if you want to start making money and you want to get in the classroom, you could. We have a lot of interns. I do notice they struggle, and we try to support district wide with that, but it's a steep learning curve without somebody helping you, without a guide on the side. And you're just hoping that someone takes you under their wing and helps you. And we do have people out there, and there are teachers that will do that. But I think you can see the difference between people who had induction and who haven't, and just the struggle. And you just have to be really strong and really ask for help and knowing who to ask to get that support without being in a program.
Okay, to clarify, and I didn't realize this till this moment, and maybe I'm even wrong when I ask this question. So if somebody comes in with a less than a preliminary credential from a university or someplace, do they qualify for to be part of your program?
No, they'd have to finish their internship
Okay, okay, okay.
and then they can be enrolled in induction. And we do offer for them, because technically they would have a teaching experience under their belt. We offer, and most have to, it's part of our program standards, early completion option. And so we can kind of speed it along if they're ready and if they qualify. But for some of them, who are in the classroom already as an intern, we have a lot of SPED interns out there right now, just because, like you said, they're hard to fill. Once they're done with that program, it's like their student teaching, then they can be enrolled in induction. And we do have options for them.
How about a mentor? Do they get a mentor?
The university, it has them find their own mentor, and it's hit or miss. And I don't think they get any type of stipend. I think it just depends, but I don't think they get any kind of like incentive like that. It's just out of the goodness of their heart.
Okay, so as I'm thinking this through, so the type of support that they would get from a classroom, if they can't cajole somebody on staff to be their mentor, to be their buddy, it's what they would get from the university, like like supervision as they're doing their coursework.
Sort of.
Like,
They'll have that, but then they'll find a teacher on campus that will agree to mentor them pro bono.
oh, okay.
But not through
Oh,
our program. We don't assign them a mentor or anything.
wow. And the district
Yeah.
doesn't support that. There's no,
Um,
or
we support in the way that, we might have a TOSA working with them, but it's not formal like induction.
okay. Okay. Wow. I hadn't thought about, wow. Okay. So sometimes the most needy, there's a little gap in services.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you've been doing this program for a while. What changes have you made, or what changes have occurred in the program since you've been involved with it?
Well, I like to think of it like generations. So when I went through induction, it was BITSA back in the day, and that was a hard one to shake, that acronym.
Yeah.
And I was of the BITSA box generation, and it was these folders, and you had to answer all these questions. And no slight to my mentors, but in my first year, my first mentor quit mid-year, and I never saw her again. So I did a lot of that on my own. And then my second year, I got assigned, the one guy that said he'd do it, but like it was, I'll see you at the end of the year. Let me know how that goes for you.
Yeah.
And so I think that really impacted, obviously, it made an impression on what kind of mentor I wanted to be. And it also shaped me as a teacher. I feel like I have that resilience, right? And then from there, the state kind of transitioned to this CFAST program, and it was this large binder that you'd have to carry around year one and year two. And it was paper after paper and lots of lots of checking boxes, and it felt like a lot of work, and it was. And so I supported a lot of new teachers through that generation. And now it's all digital. It's one page. It's all inclusive in this one document. And I feel like it's really streamlined. So, in that way, that's how it's kind of improved. But I've made some corrections and adjustments to the questioning. Before, it would just ask them about their English learners, and I wouldn't get a lot of good responses in there. And so I really have them reflect on their roster. Who is an English learner in your class? And what can we provide them? So I really feel like that one is targeted at supporting those learners. And then also we've made some adjustments to UDL because that it tends to be a very, I don't know, open type of concept. And so that one's really tough. So I feel like we've changed questions to make them a little bit more explicit.
Okay. Well, in addition to that, you've got some personal stuff you're working on kind of outside, some
Yeah,
AI. So what is it
just
exactly that you got going?
just some ideas starting. I really want to explore and possibly write a book about AI projects for students. And I know it's very taboo right now to let students in. Spoiler alert, they're in there. They're doing things in there. And so why not teach them how to use it for good and to create useful projects. So that's one thing. There's tons of methods and things out there to create obviously, you know, presentations, but kids can make their own podcasts through there. And so I think that would be kind of a fun project to spell out for teachers of ways to guide students, in those types of projects. So that, and then, my real passion not only is, supporting teachers, but I I love teaching writing, and so I want to explore concepts on how to write for the real world because I think a lot of writing nowadays is very formulaic and test driven.
Yeah.
And so I think kids need buy-in, and what a better way to teach writing through real world types of writing assignments. So those are just some little projects that I have going on the side.
Oh, we'll be looking for that. We'll be looking forward to that.
I might
So,
be asking you for help.
oh, I thought of a name. I thought of a name to send you. So we'll talk about that
All
after.
right.
Do you have any questions for me?
I do. Because you've worked with so many teachers throughout your career and you'd have this ongoing coaching cycle, you probably know best. But what kind of advice would you give new teachers? What skills or strategies? What are you seeing really that they need?
Well, I don't think you're going to be surprised by my answer here, Cam, and that is they need to be proficient in explicit instruction. Because I think let's go back to your cycle of inquiry with the teachers. I mean, if you're competent in explicit instruction, then you can eliminate that as a variable. It's I know that the lessons are sound. I know that I'm examining my instruction. So what else could it be? And I think until we take that out of the equation, it just has to be a given. It's you have an undergraduate degree in explicit instruction. Now we can start doing some additional research because there's just too many things to look at until you get there. It doesn't mean you can't be a good teacher, but I just think it's difficult to evaluate resources. It's difficult to evaluate, how am I going to use my adopted curriculum? How am I going to use this AI to support my lesson planning? All of these things, you don't have the criteria to make good judgments about. Now, the rest of first year teaching, I'm going to leave it to you and the mentors. But I think that is just a baseline.
Right.
And like you said, you know, we were together. You said it was over 3 days, but it was probably a total of less than 3 hours,
Yeah.
and it changed your life,
Yeah.
you know. And I wouldn't have said that if you hadn't told the story. But, when we got together to do this work, one of the first things you told me was you actually remembered the lesson you taught 10 years earlier,
I do.
because it made an impact. And I
Hmm.
think that's I just don't think they get that. And so I
Yeah.
have to give you kudos for recognizing that was one of the things that they needed. And unfortunately, I would doubt that ends up as one of the questions in their inquiries. Like, how do I do explicit instruction better? So that would be my advice. And so it's advice for first year teachers, but really it's advice for the people who support them at the university and like you do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's critical.
Cameron Castenada, it has been an absolute joy, and I knew it would be. And any final wrap-up thoughts, any bits of advice that you have for first-year folks or for people who work with first-year folks or
Oh,
second, early in
yeah.
education career folks?
I think, once you get past the first 2 years, it gets easier for sure. And I think, like you said, what makes it easier is if you have a really good pattern of how you develop a lesson, because that's your template and you can plug it in with anything. And so I think that's it. That's what's going to make this job sustainable is having this kind of template for each day for your lessons.
Cam, thank you. Good advice. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at gtavernetti, on Twitter, X, at gtavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused, Adaptable, Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles.